Next up is Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Nelson. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here and for the work you're doing. This is indeed very exciting technology and really represents the potential for enormous innovation in all aspects of American life and global life, actually. So thank you for the work you're doing. I wanted to drill down on a couple of things. I happen to be the mom of a 29-year-old young man with very severe disabilities. So much of what you talk about is very exciting for those of us who live in a world in which we have a family member with a disability. But it's also a reminder that people who don't have disabilities often think they know what solutions are for people who experience disabilities, and they forget to talk to people who actually experience disabilities. Example being, yes, Mrs. Hassan, the entryway is accessible for your son in a wheelchair, to find that there's a little tiny lift without the adequate turning radius to get a particular kind of wheelchair in and out, right? So can you all just talk to me about what interactions you're having with people who might represent the disability community to really understand and drill down on what the different populations within that community will need?
This is an immensely important topic, and it's one that in a very recent personal experience I came to understand in a much more profound way of someone with a disability and the challenges associated with getting into and out of a vehicle to do some very simple things. And the reality is that automated vehicles hold the potential for greater self-sufficiency and the ability to provide a basic level of mobility for persons with disabilities that doesn't exist there today. And the way we think about that is really the way we think about engineering almost any system, right? Which is to understand that customer's journey, to try to think through the very specific moments that matter and the points of considerable duress that are undergone, and to really factor those into our engineering models, right? To understand what are the differences for somebody, because disabilities aren't all the same, right? There's a wide variety of them, and our work with with ADA compliance and other pieces of regulation, I think, has given us as an industry, a very deep respect for the need to provide mobility and transportation for all, and that this is yet another case where it's a very exciting moment in time.
Thank you. Anybody else, just briefly, because I do have a couple other questions. The second question, shifting to some of the concerns I hear from consumers and constituents, is because of the technological innovations that drive AV, y'all will have an awful lot of consumer data available to you. So the question is, what information will be collected on consumers who purchase AVs? What's the industry doing to protect the data from being sold and shared without the consumer's consent? And how easily can consumers access and change what data is collected and shared about them? Anybody?
Maybe I'll start. Consumer data, and especially security and privacy, is very important. So we believe that first and foremost we need to protect this data. And we also need to have consent to use the data. As the extent of what data will be collected and how it will be shared and how it will be used, I think that continues to develop as these business models develop. But for us, in developing the technology, it's first and foremost how we protect this data and data security.
Else? All right, last question, which we probably can't handle in 48 seconds, and I'll submit it in writing, but I'm a former governor. And I am sitting here listening to all of the things that state and local governments are going to need to be thinking about to accommodate and help launch this technology. Everything from what kind of roads do we build, right? Where do we build them? How do we deal with the reality that there are bad actors out there who would like to try to infiltrate the systems, software systems that run this technology? This becomes critical infrastructure. How are we going to partner and deal with that? How are we going to deal with job training for the next generation and for the people who are today going to be displaced by this technology? And lastly, there is always that question in rural America, which is how do we get out this new technology and infrastructure to that last mile where population, or in my case in New Hampshire, the last 2/3 of my state, it isn't the last, it's the first to everybody who lives in my North Country, but 2/3 of my state is populated by 52,000 people. And so how are we going to leverage what we need to leverage and get this technology out to the least densely populated places in our country so that everybody has the freedom and the economic advantage that this technology poses? So we'll submit that in writing, and I'd look forward to working with you guys on that.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. We'll make sure we get that responded to.